Severson? York?
Here.
King? Shorts?
Here.
6 present, 2 excused, 1 absent.
Okay, thank you. Next item is 5A, approval of the minutes. Copies of the August 2nd, 2023 regular meeting were included for review in your meeting backup material. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve the August 2nd, 23
Second.
meeting by, first by Patano, second by
Second.
Swartz? Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Apking?
Aye.
Benny? Butana? Aye. Severson? Aye. York?
Aye.
Shorts?
Aye.
6 ayes, motion carried.
Thank you. Next item is 7, Planning and Zoning Commission hearing public hearings. 7A, Ordinance 80-23. I'll now turn the floor over to staff for presentation.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. For the record, Mike Struve, Planning Team Coordinator with the Planning Division. Ordinance 80-23 before you proposes changes to 2 sections or subsections of the Land Development Code, those involving accessory structures and those involving marine improvements. These proposed amendments would reinstate provisions similar to that which existed previously in the former land use and development regulations regarding the permitting of marine improvements and boat canopies on unimproved residential sites. So, as by way of background, our current code prohibits the permitting of marine improvements like decking and other types of marine improvements, as well as boat canopies on vacant residential sites or on residential sites that do not have a principal structure, like a house or a duplex. Our old or former regulations that existed prior to August of 2019 allowed property owners to come in and to go through permitting and to construct marine improvements and boat canopies on unimproved sites. So this proposed change would reinstate that flexibility for property owners that want to go ahead and permit a marine improvement before building a single-family home on their site. These proposed changes were discussed with the City Council at a committee of the whole meeting back in August, and they asked us to bring these changes before you this morning for your consideration and for their eventual consideration as well. Just to briefly summarize these changes, there are changes being made to 2 different sections of our code. Section 521E, that's being changed to allow marine improvements and boat canopies to be constructed on any residential parcel, not including a primary structure, again, typically a single-family home or a duplex. The other change is to Section 541, which will now allow marine improvements and boat canopies to be constructed by the owner of a waterfront lot after complying with provisions of Chapter 4, which contains our standards for marine improvements, and receiving a building permit from the city. Staff is recommending approval of Ordinance 8023. We have received no correspondence since this case was advertised. I will mention, however, that at the Committee of the Whole meeting back on August 23rd, there were a couple of marine contractors present when this was being discussed, and 2 or 3 of them spoke in favor of this proposed change. And I'll stand by in case you have any questions.
Thank you. King?
No, sorry, Schwartz.
So, Schwartz, okay.
I just wanted to speak on this because I have personal knowledge of this. Being an electrical contractor, we do hundreds of marine projects a year. For the last 25 years, we've been allowed to wire boltless in the vacant lots without a problem. I actually have 5 jobs under contract right now that are paused because this has come up. So it's only an improvement to the property, it's only an improvement to the neighborhood, it only attracts people to our area. We're a waterfront boating community. To continue to allow them to access this also promotes the building of the homes and keeps things moving. So it should be passed, it should stay with us being able to do it, so.
Thank you. Commissioner Severinsen?
Thank you. I'm just curious, prior to 2019, when this was enacted, what were the arguments that were brought forward that allowed this restriction to take place? Because it would seem to me that a property owner has the rights to that property and can do anything they want with it, and they've been denied that right, which we're trying to reinstate today, I would think. Maybe there's something I don't know.
So it's a very good question. It's a little unclear to me exactly how this change was made when we were reviewing and revising the land development code. Under the former land use and development regulations, and this is also true for the most part today, the city prohibits the permitting of most accessory structures. In fact, to my knowledge, all accessory structures on vacant residential properties. So for example, if you have a vacant residential lot that's not attached, for example, to your primary residence, you can't get a permit for a garage or a gazebo or a fence. In the old code, there was a carve-out for that. When this was re-examined by our consultants, that distinction, I'm speculating here, but that distinction may not have been made, and there may have been a decision at that time just to prevent all accessory structures from being permitted on residential zone lots that were not improved.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Benny?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just would like to get a little bit more clarity on the distinction between non-waterfront and waterfront property. There are a lot of us in town who have double lots, and there's a primary home, obviously, on the property, but the second lot would be considered unimproved, even if we maintain it, fence it, do whatever we want. It's part of our property, and we pay taxes on it. So this language seems to be, when you go to number E here, it seems to be making the distinction. If you have non-waterfront property, then you are not permitted to construct a fence, pergola, arbor, trellis, flagpole, etc. So it doesn't seem to speak clearly to the nature of a double lot with one unimproved lot attached to a residential property owned by the owner of that property. To use that property as they please, it would seem to restrict those situations while only allowing waterfront property to be developed in such a way without a primary structure.
So this ordinance makes a clear distinction between waterfront versus non-waterfront properties. And furthermore, it is limited only to marine improvements and boat canopies, which could only be permitted on a waterfront property. So this will allow owners in the future to go through permitting, even though the lot may not have a principal structure or building on it, and go through permitting to permit a marine improvement or boat canopy. This ordinance before you has nothing to do with any other accessory structures that are either allowed on improved residential properties or are currently prohibited on vacant residential properties. So it doesn't address anything in regards to gazebos or fences or sheds, for that matter.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about an unintended consequence that this could be read, that you could go to someone who had 2 or 3 lots connected, which there are some in town who do, or even 4 in non-agricultural areas who have used, obviously pay their taxes to have that extra land, and I wouldn't want those residents to be excluded from doing non-housing improvements on their adjacent properties, such as pergolas, tiki huts, whatever, even if we're not on the waterfront.
So in that hypothetical situation, if you have a primary structure on your property and you have additional lots that you have then strapped to or connected to that property with that house, you could go through permitting and receive a permit for a gazebo or a shed or any other accessory structure that would be allowed in that zoning district.
Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Commissioner York?
I actually have a question. I do agree with Commissioner Schwartz that it seems like a move in the right direction doing this, but mine is more a question about the construction of the ordinance. So if you look, and I think it's a little confusing because you use both, not you, but whoever drafted this ordinance, the first sentence under 5.4.1, purpose and intent, it says, in order to allow a waterfront property the same ability to utilize and access adjacent waterways, the development of, and then it lists things, docks, wharves, mooring piles, and watercraft moorings, must be accomplished in a standard and unified manner. Then it switches to the term marine improvements. And I do know that marine improvements is defined later in the building code, but or the land use code. But it seems to me it would be better to word this as the development of marine improvements such as docks, wharves, mooring piles, watercraft moorings must be accomplished. Because if you look at the definition, which I have on my phone, which is why I was looking at my phone, of marine improvement, it lists those things. Not quite the same language. It says, marine improvement means a whole constructed marine structure, including but not limited to dock, boat lift, mooring posts, walkways, and other interconnecting parts. So it's broader. This definition, marine improvement, includes other things not specifically listed. This first sentence, if I were looking at it, it looks to me like we're saying, and I realize this is outside the scope of whether we're allowing a primary structure or not, but it's just the wording is, it looks like only these docks, wharves, mooring piles, and watercraft moorings must be accomplished in a standard and unified manner. It really should say the broader term there, marine improvements, such as docks, wharves, or you don't even need to use docks, wharves, mooring piles, and watercraft moorings, frankly, because marine improvements, the definition includes those things. And maybe this was better addressed to the city attorney.
I was not involved in drafting this, but that is all current language in there. I think what the staff was trying to do is just limit it to marine improvements, and I know there's a definition of marine improvements, and boat canopies.
And you could remove those things in that first sentence, and probably should be removed.
Without analyzing it, because I'm not going to try to analyze it here in 2 minutes.
Yeah, you're right.
I really don't. I
It's a
would
lawyer
rather
in me
leave
that
it.
did that.
I would rather leave it the same, because that is existing language in the LDCs, and I
Yeah.
believe that was existing language in the LUDRs also. So I really would not want to, and I do not recommend trying to delete that language right now and just use marine improvements and boat canopies. I do know marine improvements and boat canopies have their own section, within the code and separated. I do not know the wharfs and things like that, or is that just for multifamily? Is that, I just don't want to try to sit here and select some words and to leave in or take it all out and then affect another section of the LDCs. So I would recommend leaving it the way it is right now because it accomplishes what council and what the industry and what staff is really trying to do, is put back in the fact that you can build marine improvements and boat canopies on vacant property. And just leave it at that for right now.
I do know that's.
If they want to analyze it a little bit further, they can come back in and go ahead and delete that first sentence.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That
I was just going to add to what Mr. Bartow said too, that from a staff perspective, it's very clear to us how this would be administered. You know, this would
It's what,
pertain
very
to
clear?
marine improvements broadly. We would base that on our definition of marine improvements in our definition section, and boat canopies are captured secondly because boat canopies and their supporting structures are not included as a marine improvement.
Yes, that's real clear in the definitions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, public hearing is now open. Any members of the public wishing to speak on ordinance 80-23, please use the podium to my left, your right. State your name for the record. Seeing none, public hearing is now closed. Can I have a motion to recommend approval of ordinance 80-23?
Motion to approve?
Severson, second.
Second.
Schwartz. Please call the roll.
King,
Aye.
Benny. Botana. Severson. York. King. Shorts.
Aye.
All ayes, motion carried.
Thank you. Next item is 7B, ordinance 79-23. I'll now turn the floor over to staff for presentation.
All right, good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Chad Boyko, Principal Planner with the City's Planning Division. This is Ordinance 79-23. This is a privately initiated future land use map amendment. The applicant for this is Synergy Homes, LLC. It is one parcel. It is located at 1011 Southwest 4th Terrace. It's just a little over 10,000 square feet in size. It is within the transition area of the urban services boundary, so there is utilities that are available to the site, water, sewer, and irrigation. And then the applicant's request is a future land use map amendment from the Pine Island Road District to the single-family residential future land use classification. Here's a couple of maps for you. On the left-hand side of your screen, you can see what the existing future land use of the site is. In the purple, it is the Pine Island Road District. Properties to the east, to the west, and to the south have that same similar designation of the PIRD. Properties to the north have the single-family residential classification. And then the proposal, which you can see on your right, would be to take this one parcel to the single-family residential classification. Quick findings of fact for you. It is one undeveloped parcel. There are single-family homes to the north, mostly undeveloped lots to the south with those similar Pine Island Road District corridor entitlements. The parcel has been mapped as a PIRD since 2002 when we did the Pine Island Road Master Plan, and the areas that at the time seemed suitable for the PIRD classification were mapped to this. And last, we mentioned previously that the site currently has access to water, sewer, and irrigation. We analyzed this per our comprehensive plan and did some sort of site analysis of this as well. When we looked at the commercial siting guidelines, which are within policy 1.14 of the future land use element, staff found that out of the 8 guidelines that we have to kind of determine if a site is compatible for commercial development or not, the site only met 2 of those guidelines, one of those being major intersection, which seems a little strange considering it's not at a major intersection. However, the language for that commercial siting guideline says that if you have a major intersection, for instance, in this case you have Pine Island Road and Chiquita Boulevard, and you have a non-residential or mixed-use designation such as the Pine Island Road District, and that designation extends outward from that intersection in certain directions, then a site can still be classified as being at a major intersection. This site, it has the Pine Island Road District does extend from that intersection of Pine Island Road and Chiquita Boulevard to this site and even past this site, which is why it does meet that guideline. And then the second guideline that it meets is compactness, which you saw on the aerial. It's a rectangular shape. It's not irregularly shaped, and it meets that compactness guideline. It doesn't meet certain things such as access or integration or assembly, saying that this is one property. Of those 4 properties that are surrounding it, they all have different ownership, and they are all owned by sort of single entity owners. Staff also looked at this in terms of just an overall compatibility of how this would work as a commercial site, and staff found that the site really does lack depth, width, and while you do have, I mean, it's 10,000 square feet, you don't really have a lot of properties that are within this particular block. It's really sort of an in-cap property to these, and it's just south of single-family homes. And while you could assemble the 4 properties that are there, you'd still only end up with around 1 acre in size, and then you would still be abutting some existing single-family homes that are there. So you would still have not a very large parcel for commercial development, and you would still have the issue of you wouldn't have any adequate frontage unless, in some case, you were to assemble these with the properties to the south, vacate some local roads, and then you might have a larger parcel with frontage on Pineland Road. But all of that is sort of hypothetical, and it would take a lot of work and doesn't seem likely at this point, especially since nothing has really occurred on this in terms of assemblage since this land use amendment in 2002 to the Pineland Road District. And then lastly, staff looked at this, and we found that the future land use map amendment and a rezone would allow for single-family homes, which we think would be more compatible with the existing neighborhood that exists to the north, where you already have existing and developed and it's fully entitled single-family homes, and staff find that this site would work better as a single-family property than as a Pineland Road District property at this time. So when we analyzed this for our comprehensive plan, we came to the conclusion that we would recommend approval of this to amend the site to the single-family residential classification. We have received 1 email. I would assume that it was in support, as they also expressed a similar interest to have their property go from the Pineland Road District classification to the single-family residential classification. I'm here for any further questions.
Questions? Commissioner Bottano?
Yeah, I guess I don't have a fundamental problem with your analysis. What's concerning to me is that you're only trying to change one site on the whole side of the street. They're all zoned commercial now. So, you're sort of predetermining by getting this one approved that nobody's going to be able to do anything commercial on that other side of the street. It's sort of a preemptive move, if you will. I don't mean that in any derogatory way, but I just don't understand why we're not considering changing the whole side of the street if that's what's going to ultimately become the thing, instead of you having to write a big long report 10 times to change every one of those sites one side at a time.
Sure. Can I address that? The request that you have before you was privately initiated, so the applicant and the owner came to us for this. Now, late last year, or middle of the last legislative session, there was a Senate bill passed that does not allow for any communities that were within a certain radius of where Hurricane Ian hit. It does not allow for any local governments to pass any legislation or ordinances that would be considered more restrictive to property owners. So at this time, our hands are somewhat tied in that even if we thought that the remainder of these properties would be suitable for single-family residential classification, because that is a downgrade in the sort of the status of these properties, we are not allowed to go in and change them on our own. Normally we would consider sort of piggybacking onto this request and changing the remainder of that block. However, with that Senate bill that was passed last year, staff does not really have that ability to go in and do that.
Thank you. Brian?
I was going to kind of mention that too, but since this is a privately initiated future land use map amendment, I'd recommend before we get into a lot of discussion that if the applicant is here, the applicant should present their testimony. Thank you.
Present it now, and then we can get questions.
And then, yeah.
Yes, if the applicant would like to come forward and present. They are? No, no one's here.
I think they're in the back.
This is Daniela Mitchell. I'm here. I know we were aware we received the letter. I'm a realtor with RE/MAX, and not only I'm here with my client, Luis Salazar, and he's one of the owners of the corner lot, which is also interested in the move for residential, and we agree with the provisions relayed here. I also yesterday got in touch with the two other owners, which are the in-between, those builders and Mr. Salazar, and they would also like for that to be turned into residential. So our understanding based on my client present here today is that, you know, we all in that block would benefit from that turning into residential rather than CC, which is currently, so.
Thank you. Any, let's see, Commissioner York?
So no one's here from Synergy, is that right?
It does not appear so. They paid their advertising fees and they were aware of the date, but it does not look as though they have made the hearing today.
Okay. A couple of things. So first of all, I do know there are some single-family homes that abut this piece of property, or at least are on the property that abut, maybe not directly behind it. But, so you build a house there, and across the street remains the Pine Island district, the commercial district, or mixed use, I should say, district, across the street, across 4th Terrace. So right now, only the backs of the homes are going to face any kind of, let's say, professional buildings that would be right on 4th and abutting them where this property is that we're talking about. But I think that if you build a single-family home, they're going to be facing something like the man caves that are being built there, those storage units that are sort of like for cars and different things. So I'm not quite sure. I think you could always make an argument to cut away at the Pine Island district. That bothers me. And I also wonder, I mean, so is there an argument to be made that, no, we won't go any further than this? Or, because we do not want to have this entire city strictly building residences the way it was originally platted, is that the word? Or, and then we have nothing to support them service-wise, you know, the homes.
Correct, and I think, you know, for the most part, staff's position on taking away commercial and mixed-use entitlements is pretty clear that we try to avoid that. However, you know, when we get certain cases that are privately initiated and we look at them in terms of really what their characteristics are and where they are and what's surrounding them, you know, we try to do our best to provide a clear picture of what, you know, the likelihood of development is going to be. And when you have a site that's, you know, this size, lacking depth, abutting single-family residential, it's tricky, not only in the sense that it lacks a lot of depth to develop something commercial there, but because you're directly abutting single-family residential, a lot of what, if this were to develop as a commercial site, you'd be eating up a lot of the limited depth that you have with landscape buffering as it is. I mean, you'd be looking at a pretty substantial buffer of 20 to 40 feet. So you would, you know, even in that case, you're looking at a very small commercial site with no frontage. You know, you're looking at frontage on a local street, and we have seen time and time again that a lot of those kinds of sites that only have frontage on local streets, they rarely get developed in this case. You do have some properties that are further along the Pine Island Road District where they've developed with some small contractor buildings that were done 10 to 15 years ago. But a lot of times, unless you have a little more depth to work with, you don't see a lot of that anymore. Maybe down the road you would, and it's possible. However, though a lot of those sites that have already developed with some of those small contractor buildings, they had Pineland Road District all around them, so they didn't have the landscape buffering requirements when you are directly abutting a single-family residence such as this.
So essentially, though, by approving this, to get to the commissioner's point to my right, is we're basically saying they're eventually all going to be changed to single-family home sites. There's no way that this one's going to get approved and everything else around it is going to remain in the Pine Island Road District, as evidenced by the people in the back saying that we have another lot that we want to build a single-family home on.
I mean, it's possible. You know, I can't speak to the blocks that are to the east and the west of this, but I think our staff's analysis would be that this sort of strip that you see that's along, you know, that's north of Southwest 4th Terrace, it's not really all that suitable for as a designation such as Pineland Road District as it stands. If it was commercial professional and they went with like a professional office style zoning, that might work better because then you would lessen the buffering requirements that you have there. But as the Pineland Road District, it gets real tricky because you have you have a pretty substantial buffering because we allow certain things like industrial uses, warehouses, automobile repair shops, and those are things that ideally you would not want to see, you know, abutting residential development.
You know, one thing I do worry about, and this is not really a question at all, but I worry that developers and builders buy lots regardless of what the designation is in the future land use map, and eventually the zoning. We don't deal with the zoning, just the future land use map, and they just assume that it's a slam dunk that it's going to be changed. I do worry about that.
I think probably there's a handful that have that idea of doing that. I think for some of them, my guess is a lot of them, and I'm not a realtor, but we see when we do some sort of research on some of these purchases, you see a lot of builders that will just go in and will bulk buy properties, and a lot of times they're not even checking what the land use and the zoning are. So they may acquire 25, 30, 50 properties at a time, and 49 out of the 50 will be zoned properly for residential development, and they'll just get one that happens to be in that batch that will be, you know, commercial or you know, or Pine Island Road District or whatever it is. And at that point, they go for the change. Sometimes I ask for those things, and they're not denied. I mean, they're not granted. We've had a number of builders that have come in where they've bulk bought properties in certain areas, and we recommend denial, and council has upheld that, or we go through it and we tell them, hey, we're not going to recommend approval of this, and then they withdraw the request. So I think there's probably, there's two sides of the coin to that. Yes, I think some probably buy with the intent of, you know, getting it changed in the future, but I think some of them just buy because they're buying so many properties at a time, and they just get stuck with one property that doesn't have residential entitlements.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Schwartz?
I guess my situation with this is I actually travel this street every day going to work. So I know me and a lot of people travel this street. So it's already a busy street with cars. It's loaded with commercial already down towards the other end. Huge strips of property that's going to promote more commercial development. There's two single family structures on this street completely. They're out of place, and I've been here long enough that I see what happens in this is we do this, we allow a single family home, everything else still becomes commercial around it, and eventually that single family home is either in bad shape or eventually gets bought by a contractor and becomes a dentist office or something. So are we just precursoring that to happen? Are we not looking 10 years ahead of time and saying, let's put a house here now? Because it does back up to houses, which is the point, and it's true. So it's a terrible situation because you have all this commercial coming in. It's a good commercial area, but we've allowed residential to come up to the back of it now. So what is the best thing? Do we allow these people to put a house here that we know is going to become a problem in the future? Or do we say, no, we stick with how it's going to be?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Staff does find that the areas that are to the south of this, south of Southwest 4th Terrace, we would not ever support those properties, especially that block that when you're looking at on your screen.
Right.
it's pretty much totally undeveloped. I mean, that is a, sort of prime sort of extension of the Pine Island Road District that's there. I think that if you saw, if this site were to be changed to single-family residential, a home was built there, perhaps the two other homes that are there, or two other sites get changed as well, and they built single-family homes. I think the idea of them becoming a problem down the road is less likely when they have compatible land use and zoning. I think that the homes that may be getting a little looking like run down is when you get situations where they're incompatible and they can't pull certain building permits to renovate, improve, expand, things along those lines. But if you have fully entitled single-family homes and you have no issues with insurance, mortgages, things like that, where you have all the rights of a single-family house, the likelihood of that home becoming, quote, a problem is lessened when you have all the certain things in place that allow you to do whatever you can with a single-family house.
It just seems tough when we put single-family and commercial so close together. It just seems problematic to me.
Yeah, I think when this site you're looking at, it's tough either way, because you're either putting a commercial site abutting some residential development. If this site were to be changed to single-family, at least you have some separation with the local street, Southwest 4th Terrace. Those properties that are on the other side of the street will have some buffering requirements, so you will have, some protection for whatever homes are built there. But, at least it's a local road, and it's only 2 lanes, and it's not 4-lane where we're putting curb cuts on a 4-lane road, which is something we try to avoid. So I think the access issues would be lessened by the fact that it's only a 2-lane road. Regardless of whatever the traffic level, this might be a local street that's acting as a collector road kind of thing.
Yeah, when
But,
Pine Island's busy, everybody just cuts back.
Yeah, and I get that, and we have
listen
roads
up,
like
go.
that where you basically just got long stretches where people use it as access.
Yeah.
We call those, local streets that are functioning as collector roads. We have those in certain parts of the city. However, when we looked at this, sort of like on a site basis, with a lot of the factors that are going in there, staff found that it was appropriate to recommend approval of single family.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Botana?
Yes, I tend to agree with Commissioner Schwartz and Commissioner King. I think that site could very easily, particularly with a little consolidation of a couple of the lots, become a doctor's office or some kind of professional building down the road as a commercial zone area, as opposed, particularly when it's going to be across from the street from the bigger area that's likely to be things. So I think at some point we really have to start to draw the line and say, we have to fight giving up commercially zoned properties for development for the detriment of the city, and I'm going to be in favor of not doing this.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Benny?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I listened carefully to the other commissioners, and I just want to express that there's always got to be a border. Inevitably, there's a line. In this case, I think that this is an appropriate line based on the current lack of assemblage opportunity and the way these lots are situated. I travel that area pretty frequently as well. And when it comes to the question of people buying lots in a speculative manner, hoping that zoning changes, that's just free enterprise. It's something that's going to happen. There's no way that we can or should try to interfere with that. There are winners and losers in such propositions. That's the way the market works. As long as there's nothing untoward or inappropriately determined before someone purchases a lot, they're taking their chances. My final concern, though, is for the purchasers of homes and lots in these areas. I don't know. I think that we have an excellent realtor community around here, and they're very transparent. But people need to know. Right across the street from you, there could be a shopping mall. There could be, a very large-scale commercial development right in front of your house. So, as long as everyone's eyes wide open on all of this, that's my only concern is people not being misled, and the fact is that we're always going to have a border. I would rather have a home on a border than a bunch of empty lots, which wind up being attractors for problems and and vermin and et cetera. So, I think we're better off if there is a border to have it with a nice quality, single-family home than having it be vacant like so many of our lots are in the city. So that's my feeling.
Thank you.
And excellent presentation, Chad. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I'll just make a few comments. This is one of those unintended consequences of Senate Bill 250. So as we look at it, do we do this right now and allow a single-family home to go in there with the possibility that sometime the Senate Bill 250 is going to be amended so that we can do things? So it's kind of got our hands tied as far as it's a very difficult decision to let one in there and then later on someone else buys that property and it goes commercial. So I've got a problem with that right now. Do we wait until the amendments to Senate Bill 250 come about, which I would suppose they probably will at some point, and allow this to go change the zoning on that whole stretch? Or do we take a chance now and approve that one and then see what happens down the road? So, it's a problem, and it's presents a difficult decision right now. So thank you, Chet, for the presentation.
Senate Bill 250 actually does have a sunset date. It sunsets at, I think it's September 30th of next year,
year.
so about a year away.
Yeah, so if we
So
got-
it would probably take a good, 4 months, 6 months for the city to go ahead and analyze that whole strip north of Southwest 4th Terrace and so forth. So it would take a little while, and what I understand with the legislation is that it may come in action. This session, they may shorten that time
Right.
period. I do not know. But I
Right.
just wanted to make sure you all knew there. That wasn't, Senate Bill 250 is not something that continues throughout the
Right.
life until somebody comes and does something. It does sunset.
Just presents a dilemma right now.
Yeah, it does. It does. We
So-
don't like it.
Right, no, I mean, there's a lot of things that are gonna come up that we couldn't do
Yeah.
before, that, it's just a matter of time. So my opinion is, I think we should wait until the sunset comes, or if it's shortened, and then go on from that particular point so that we don't take a chance on getting commercial in on either side of that and then having a real problem that will exist as we have in the past. Okay, thank you. No other comments? Okay. We'll open this up for, I'm sorry, I didn't see your light on.
Explain what Senate Bill 250 is and how it affects this?
Senate Bill 250, the part that affects this, states that local jurisdictions cannot amend any regulation that is more restrictive or burdensome to the property owner. So a future land use amendment that is going from a non-residential mixed-use type district to a single family is actually more restrictive. So we, the city, cannot go and take that whole strip north of Southwest 4th Terrace and if it continues to Northwest 2nd Terrace and amend those because we are making them more restrictive by putting them to single family. But a property owner can come in and request a more restrictive one. So that's what this particular applicant did, and it's what the other ones back there want to do. So.
Thank you. No further comments? Okay, we'll open ordinance 7923. Public hearing is now open. Any members of the public wishing to speak, please use the podium to your right, my left. State your name for the record.
Daniela Mitchell. So, nesse momento, at this time, we have like all 4 lot owners here, and and all of us would appreciate the change in zoning. I do understand the concerning about the rezoning and going back and forth. I do, and they do agree as well with all the alignments put by the applicant. There is a street. If there is commercial zoning on the other side, there is a barrier there. it is very residential, that location, and we do also see a lot of commercial lots out there. There is a lot of room for improvement and development of commercial professional. It's just very, at this time, saturated in the market, and there is no, no purchase of those lots, let's put it that way. So there is no much of that commercial growth going on in the city as of right now. So what we do see is the necessity for residential homes, which the numbers for searching for those homes are not as it should be, to give, the community places to look for to find their own home. And I do believe, as a builders here, and throughout the whole entire block, that's what, the envision is for, so.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Seeing none, public hearing is now closed. I'll entertain a motion for approval of ordinance 79-23. Benny, first. Do I have a second? No second. Second. Phil Botano, second. Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
App King,
Nay.
Benny. Botana,
Nay.
Severson,
Nay.
York,
No.
King,
Nay.
Schwartz,
Nay.
6 nays, 1 aye, motion failed.
Thank you. Item 8A, citizens' input. I'll now open the floor for citizens' input. Any member of the audience wishing to speak, please use the podium to your right, my left, and state your name for the record.
Good morning. My name is Marie Kavanaugh. I know it's not on your agenda today, but I'm here to talk about Redfish Point. I want to encourage all of you to vote against changing the zoning on that parcel. What they want to do there is not going to be beneficial to the city of Cape Coral. They still haven't even finished developing Tarpon Point, and they want to put in this monstrosity that's going to drive out all the wildlife that's there and subject the residents of Pelican area to 3 to 5 years of incessant, constant noise from the construction that's going to take place there. So I just really want you to very carefully consider not changing the zoning on that parcel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Eileen Venezia, and I'm also here today to ask you to protect the wetlands in the area of Piney Point, which some are calling Redfish Point Mixed-Use District. Last week, a large group of people assembled at Southwest 6th Place and Rose Garden Boulevard at the location where a 100-foot wide road would be constructed to allow access to the land to be developed. They are rallying to protect the wetlands in Piney Point. The construction of that road would require the vacancy of a conservation easement under which the land is held. That easement is there just to prohibit this type of devastation of precious wetlands that have acres of mangroves on it. These mangroves are so important that just recently a bill has been filed for the 2024 legislative session to fund restoration and efforts to identify vulnerable coastal areas for mangrove restoration. This bill would require the Florida Department of Environmental Protection to identify these areas. When the state of Florida is actively trying to protect and restore mangroves to protect vulnerable coastal areas, why would anyone deliberately destroy acres of mangroves and wetlands? Every acre is precious. Recently, the news press reported that Holly Smith, the recent mayor of the city of Sanibel, stated that new folks coming in and wanting to develop property on the island asked her, and I quote, "Hey, we want to do this here, but can we get around this wetlands thing? It's not a big deal, right?" And she sat across the table from representatives of a pretty big organization who wanted to do this development, and she stated, "This isn't the place you're going to be building because this is a big deal, right?" She went on to state that you have these moments where you have to stand up and assert what the place is all about. Piney Point in Cape Coral is one such place where the city should stand up and state that destroying the wetlands is not something we do. A recent article in the Cape Coral Breeze had a representative of the current owners stating that this development would not affect Rotary Park. While the road does not go through Rotary Park, the trees will be raised just south of the property line, trucks rumbling back and forth for years as first land is filled and raised to whatever height is required, and then the actual construction begins. The quiet and wildlife that so many people come to Rotary Park for will be adversely affected forever. In addition, the proposal also includes removing mangroves and other trees to construct a boardwalk along the southeastern part of the land. To compensate for this destruction, a nature resource educational center would be constructed. There is already one of these in Rotary Park, which already stresses the benefits and protections that mangroves provide. Next to this property is another piece of land. If you look at this land from a boat, as it's the only way to access it, you'll see that the water table is already very high. The current owners are donating this property to the city. I can only guess that it being inaccessible and due to high water level, it is useless, and they might as well donate it. How high will the water table be in the Piney Point area in a few years? How many thousands of truckloads of fill will be required on a regular basis to raise an even higher and higher barrier to prevent flooding? Please deny the change when it comes up for a vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak at citizens' input? Seeing none, citizens' input is closed. Moving along to item 9, any staff updates? None. Next item is 10, other business. Is there any other business to discuss? Seeing none, okay. Next item is 11, any members' comments? Okay. Item 12, date and time of next meeting. The next regular meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission is scheduled for Wednesday, November 1st, 2023, 9 a.m. in council chambers. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So.
Okay, Dan, second?
Second.
Seconds, Jack. Okay, meeting adjourned.